My name is Alan Krasner. I am an endocrinologist and I am the chief endocrinologist at Crinetics Pharmaceuticals. We are very interested in discovering and developing new drugs for patients who need it with various endocrine diseases, including acromegaly and congenital adrenal hyperplasia and Cushing's disease. Acromegaly is a rare disease. It's caused by a tumor that forms in the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is the master gland that hangs at the base of the brain, and it secretes a variety of hormones. One of them normally is growth hormone. When acromegaly occurs, a tumor of the growth hormone secreting cells develops, and these tumors secrete too much growth hormone. This results over time in another hormone accumulating called IGF-1, and together this excess hormonal exposure results in various problems, including a lot of symptoms that are very bothersome for patients, as well as some damage to the body, including over time, if untreated, can damage the heart. So it's a very serious disease, and these patients suffer quite a bit. Even with today's treatments, there's room for improvement in the treatment of patients with acromegaly. Patients with acromegaly, once they're diagnosed, the first step is usually to remove as much of the pituitary causing the disease as possible surgically. And roughly half the patients are cured surgically, and they are good to go after that. But the other half of patients, there's still some pituitary tumor cells left behind, and these patients generally need to go on medications to control the excess growth hormone secretion. This is usually a lifelong prospect once someone is started on medications for acromegaly. Most of the time it's for a long-term indefinite period. The current first-line medical treatment or medication treatment for uncured acromegaly are octreotide or lanreotide injections, and these injections are long-acting injections. They're large, painful, monthly injections typically, and they're quite burdensome on the lives of patients. And we are working at Crinetics on a new oral alternative to this that works kind of in the same way, and our trials are looking promising that they are showing similar degrees of disease control as you see with these painful injections, only it's a once-a-day tablet instead. So we presented 3 studies actually pertaining to the use of our new investigational drug candidate called paltusotine for the treatment of acromegaly. 3 different studies. The first one is called Pathfinder 1. This was a large phase 3 trial in which patients who were already treated with these monthly injections were switched to once-a-day paltusotine. Patients were taking paltusotine in this study for 9 months, and during that time we measured the degree of disease control in different ways. One of the key measures, of course, is a blood test. It's called insulin-like growth factor 1, or IGF-1. This is a hormone that it goes to abnormally high levels in patients with this disease. We showed that patients who have their IGF-1 levels controlled on the injections, if they switch to paltusotine for 9 months, maintain that same degree of control in most cases. And so we think this is one study which documents that it is a viable alternative to the injections with respect to controlling the biochemistry of the disease. But it's also important to remember that patients are more than just a simple blood test result, and we made a point in this study to measure as a secondary endpoint the day-to-day symptoms these patients experience from their acromegaly. And we were able to show that switching to paltusotine also controlled symptoms to the same degree as the injections did. And when patients were randomly assigned to receive a placebo, both their IGF-1 and their symptoms got worse. Pathfinder 1 was a demonstration that patients with acromegaly who someday, assuming this drug gets approved someday by the US FDA, and hopefully someday the European authorities as well, if they were interested in switching from their injections to once-a-day paltusotine, we think we're showing that the paltusotine would achieve control of both the biochemical abnormalities in the disease and the symptom burden of the disease. The other study is Pathfinder 2. These are patients who are currently not treated with a medication for their acromegaly, and they're basically started on once-a-day paltusotine versus placebo in Pathfinder 2. And we showed that paltusotine results in superior control of the disease compared to placebo, both in terms of IGF-1 levels, or the biochemical measure of the disease, but also, again, in terms of symptom control. And the third study we reported at the Endocrine Society meeting was a long-term extension study from our original phase 2 studies in patients with acromegaly. And we showed that long-term, and this is now patients taking paltusotine for 3.5 years on average, maintain their biochemical and symptom control. So we think paltusotine looks very promising as an oral alternative to the injections that works reliably and also maintains control over long periods of time. The plan is to file a new drug application to the FDA in the second half of this year, later in the year. And if all goes well during the review process, we hope the product might be approved next year. This is a big milestone for Crinetics. Currently, Crinetics does not have approved products yet, so this would be our first. But we hope the first of many to treat many different groups of patients who have medical needs with endocrine diseases. We're very focused in the field of endocrinology and also endocrine-related tumors. And that's the aspiration for the future, is for paltusotine for acromegaly to be the first, but for many other approvals in the future, including using the same drug, paltusotine, for the treatment of a different disease called carcinoid syndrome, which is found in patients with neuroendocrine tumors. I'm just very excited to work at Crinetics because I'm an endocrinologist, and for many years endocrine patients really have not been receiving a lot of attention from industry-sponsored new drug discovery and development programs. And Crinetics really stepped in to fill the gap there. And we're off to a great start with paltusotine and our second in-line clinical investigational drug candidate called atumelnant, which is an ACTH receptor blocker, and a whole host of interesting potential drug candidates that are still in the laboratory stage of discovery and development. And it's just a very exciting place to be, and I'm glad our endocrine patients are getting their due attention, because there's a lot of ongoing medical need in this field that needs, and there's always room for improvement, and we're working on that.